Oh, I was watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine and I fell asleep. So, do you ever get that? Like, you fall asleep watching something, you wake up, unlock your computer, it's like, oh, halfway through an episode or something. Um, yeah, yeah. Yeah, a couple seasons forward. Um, what? You want to watch the new season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine? I'm actually still on season one. I just started it like a week ago. It's pretty good. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I'm gonna hop on that. Um, let's see. Let's look at all these windows, all these tabs. Oh my god. Let's just close that, or not close, minimize. Let's close this stuff. How was everyone's day two? Pretty, pretty good time. Nice, nice. Anything in particular that's been fun or particularly like hard? Any snags along the way that you want to kind of address? Sweet. All right. I mean, it looks like everyone's crushing it then. I'll hold you to it. So today's lecture is about something pretty particular. It's about objects in JavaScript. I have a bunch of notes already written. I'm trying out something new today where like I have notes already written up here and I'm just gonna write them like write up little stuff on the side, just to give myself a little bit of a script to kind of follow. So let me just pop that here, and then you know what we're gonna do is open up my terminal. My terminal has a fish in it. When I load it up, it's got a little fish, and I can summon the fish by going fish logo. And beyond that, um, whenever like the terminal itself, you know how yours has like a little dollar sign or whatever? I think yours a dollar sign. Is that what it is? Yeah, mine's a little fish. Right. It's just a little yeah, that's hacker. So CD. I'm going to hop into Vagrant cuz that's what we're going to use today. So today's topic is well, let's start with the day. Today is week 1, day 3. And the topic is objects in JavaScript. So we're going to spend the entire lecture just diving into the ins and outs of how objects work in JavaScript. What are objects? What are they for? How are they different than some other things that maybe we've used so far, such as arrays and stuff like that. I'm gonna weave in and out of like writing code and talking over the course of the lecture. I do again want to invite you to like control the flow of this. So if you want me to talk a bit more and code a little bit less, tell me that. Say like, hey, I'd like kind of like a longer explanation. If you want to see more code examples, if maybe the examples that I code up, you feel don't go in depth enough, tell me that, right? And we'll brew up some deeper kind of code examples for that. Because what we want to do here is like I want to kind of de-magic like objects. I want to take away a little bit of the stress that some people tend to feel over objects in JavaScript, and really show you how like they can be a tool that is empowering for you, right? They don't have to be something that's a roadblock. They don't have to be something scary. They can be something that you see as just another tool in your toolbox. Yeah. So putting together some goals here. Let me write this stuff down here. Whoop. So in terms of today's like lecture's goal, the thing that I'm trying to focus on is I want to give you an introduction to how we use objects in JavaScript, in particular for storing data, right? So like a lot of this lecture is going to focus around I have a bunch of data, I need to put it somewhere, and an object is going to be, in my case, the ideal way to store that data somewhere. Okay? Objects are going to bring up a conversation around what we call key value pairs. right? So at the end of the lecture, when we come back to the goal, I want us to feel like we really understand what I mean when I say key value pair. And then we're going to also dive into how objects and functions can interact, right? How can I leverage objects when I'm calling a function, right? So we're going to see some examples that go into this. In particular, objects. I've said objects a couple times. But we're also going to dive into primitive data types. Right? We're going to talk about what primitive data types in JavaScript are, how data is particularly passed to functions, and also there's this word this that shows up in JavaScript. We're going to have a small conversation about this today, right? But I want to be clear, the concept of this in JavaScript, it's a little convoluted, and it's something that's going to take you, like a while over the course of boot camp to learn more and more about, right? So I'm gonna take like a tentative kind of leap into it, right? But I really want to stress that it's not something that I expect you to by the end of the day or even by the end of the week to be fully comfortable with, right? So I'll reiterate that when we get to the conversation around this, but I just want it to be clear from the get-go. Okay, so let's start with a review of like primitive values in JavaScript. Right? There are things in JavaScript, right? Programming languages generally give us a set of like basic tools, right? Basic tools that come with the language that we can use for expressing ourselves, right? What are some examples of like values that I'm allowed to use in JavaScript? Strings, right? So a string is a basic value inside of JavaScript, and it might look something like, something like that. Right? Hello world, I've made a string. This is called a string literal. Right? I've written the string out. I've got quotes around it, and then I write whatever text I want on the inside. Right? Built into JavaScript. And this is useful for some reasons. Now, first of all, I want to point out that strings can be done like that, or they can be done, for our purposes so far, they can be done with single quotes. Functionally the same thing. The exact same thing. One might ask why we have two different kinds here, right? And if you're interested in the answer to that, that might be something like, if I want to write, and the dog said woof. This is a malformed string. I've got an open quote, and then the close quote, I might assume is this last one. But JavaScript does not understand that this is a sentence, right? It doesn't understand this. So instead it thinks that this is the closing, and then the word woof with an exclamation mark, it would assume maybe it's some JavaScript thing, right? It doesn't know what to do with it. So if I was to try and do that in Node, for example, I'm going to pop up Node in a second. But if I was to try to do that in Node, I would get some kind of error, right? So CD week 1, day 3. No. What? Oh, CD week 1, day 3, prep. Okay. So far I just have notes and README. But if I was to hop into Node and paste in that, and the dog said woof, I end up getting syntax error, right? I can get around this by putting backslashes right before those special characters. Right? I could get around this by doing this. And I get, and the dog said woof. So this works fine, but it's ugly, right? This just feels gross. So instead what JavaScript says is, hey, you know what? If you want, you can use single quotes instead for your string. So then inside you can say, and the dog said woof, like that. And now the single quotes, those are going to be our string quotes. And the double quotes inside, those are going to be actual characters. So, wham, and there we go. Okay. It's just something I want to bring up because sometimes people get confused a little bit about why there's two different ways to make strings. There is a third way to make strings, which I'm not going to talk about right now. Right? Some of you might have already seen it. I think it pops up during the prep work a little bit. Right? Next week, that third way is going to, become a little bit more talked about. So we have strings. And the thing is, like, strings are in JavaScript by design. And they serve a particular purpose. Right? They serve the purpose of sometimes I want to have words. Right? Sometimes I want to have text in a program. Right? Maybe that text is being displayed. Maybe that text is a name. Right? Maybe that text is an error message. Right? It's just something that tends to be useful within a program. So the designers of JavaScript said, hey, you know what? We're going to give you a string type. Right? And it's useful. There's other types, right? In JavaScript we have numbers. Right? Numbers are, again, something that's granted to us by JavaScript because it just so happens that a lot of the time when you're writing programs, people tend to write programs that have to do with numbers in one way or another, right? Maybe I want to count how many users there are. Maybe I'm writing a program to calculate pi to a certain, digit, right? Numbers tend to be really useful in programming, so we get, numbers. 12, 12.5. Numbers, again, granted to us by JavaScript as a type. Are there other types? Booleans. Okay, so we have Booleans, meaning true and false. Right? So a Boolean, again, another type that for convenience is granted to us by JavaScript. One could say that, hey, this whole true and false situation, why can't it just be, why can't it just be true and false as strings? Right? One might ask that and say, hey, like, why do we need an entire new type? Why do we need an entire new type instead of just having the strings true and false? And the answer to this is that in programming languages, like in JavaScript, there are many cases where I might need to make a decision about something. Right? I might need to make a decision about if something is true or if something is false. Or I might want to get a response back such as, is the number 4 less than 10? Now, it would be, conceivably totally fine for something like this to return the string true. But since this is such a common thing that I have to do, right? Since it's such a common thing for me to have to deal with truthy values and falsy values, right? And also very, very common for me to have to do the AND operation and the OR operation and the NOT operation, right? The designers of JavaScript said, hey, you know what? Instead of you having to deal with strings, right, and rolling your own way of checking, whether two things like true and true as strings or whatever, right, we'll give you a Boolean type, right, for convenience. When you go look at other programming languages, like in week 7, when you start doing Ruby, you're going to find out that there are different types. There's some of the same types. Boolean's still there, right? String is still there. But in Ruby, you'll find that maybe the way numbers exist is a little bit different. Like maybe in Ruby, there's not just number, maybe there's a whole number and a decimal number. Right? And that's something that kind of arises out of a community needing a particular thing. Right? So I really want to make it clear that the stuff that's added into a language, right, such as numbers, Booleans, right, like this stuff, strings, these things get added because a certain number of people see that they have to satisfy or solve a certain number of problems, right? And the designers of the language recognize that maybe adding new constructs or new things to that language, right, will make it easier for the people who are using that language to solve those issues. So, there's other types of things in here following a little bit off of this Boolean with the true and false, right? This kind of introduces a question of truthiness and falsiness, right? Or you'll see it, as truthy and falsy. So in JavaScript, and this is not the same in other languages, in JavaScript, there's such things as a truthy value and a falsy value beyond just the Booleans true and false. So what I mean by this is when I have an if statement, when I have an if condition, I can put anything I want, any value in here, anything I want. And there are some things that JavaScript will consider truthy and some things that JavaScript will consider falsy. This does not mean that the thing that I put in here is equal to true or equal to false. It's got a truthiness to it, right? It's a different concept. So in here, for example, if I put the word true is truthy. False is falsy. There's a short list of the types of things in JavaScript that are falsy. So the falsy values in JavaScript are here. Now you may have seen these before, but I want to highlight them again because it'll pop up over the course of this week and next week. But the falsy values, meaning the things that I couldn't put in here that will be treated as false, are false, 0, undefined, null, not a number, and the empty string. Right? These are the 6 things. The 6 things that if you put them into an if statement, right, will not trigger the if statement. Right? Truthy values. Truthy values are like literally anything else. Literally anything else, if you put it in an if statement, will be treated as truthy. So just to show you what that kind of looks like, if I had an if condition here that said if false, and I'm writing this out in one line, console log, hello. Is everyone comfortable with what this kind of means? Right? So if false, console log, hello, what am I expecting when I press enter? Nothing, right? I'm not expecting anything. The REPL automatically just prints out undefined, but it'll print out undefined whenever anything kind of runs. If I did true, I get hello out. And if I was to go down that list of things, such as 0, I get undefined, right? If I throw in 1 is a truthy value. I get hello. Right? So 1 is truthy, so it triggers the rest of the code. Okay, and you can play around with this stuff and see that, okay, if I do an empty string, it doesn't trigger. And if I do a full on, oops, oh my god, if I do a full on, hello world, that does give me hello. Right? This is important to get, right? And it can be the cause of some issues, right, in your code. And it can be the cause of some bugs if you're not fully aware of the values that are truthy and the values that are falsy. Right? Sometimes you'll be tossing something into an if condition, right, and you'll be wondering why it's not going through or even why it is going through. Right? Take a look at what the actual value is. Right? Take a look at the value and then check to see whether it's one of these falsy values or a truthy thing. So falsy values, truthy values, this is really a conversation about primitives. There are some other ones in here that I wanted to talk about. Array. And again, this stuff will be formatted when I send it out to you. So an array is another thing that JavaScript gives to me. Oh, actually, before I do this, are there any questions about falsies and truthies I should have asked? Yep.
So if you do false equals false,
Mm-hmm.
true.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one of them that didn't work that way. I think it was like not a number or
Mm-hmm.
undefined.
Right, so you're saying false double or triple equals here?
Uh,
So let's always use the triple equals, right? In general, always use the triple equals. The double equals is going to try and make two things to be the same type. It's going to try. So if I do quote 2, so the string 2, double equals 2, I get true. But if I did this with a triple equals, right, it doesn't try to make the types the same. Right? The triple equals is going to check to make sure that the values are the same and that the type of the thing is the same. Right? The triple equals is more strict. And since this double equals can be confusing about like when it works and when it doesn't, right? The suggestion is to always use the triple equals. Right? You can dive into learning more about the double equals as you go on, but we're going to expect you, for good style, to use the triple. Now, you were saying if I do like false, triple equals false, this is true. If I do false, triple equals like 0, you're saying, for example, or?
I think not a number equals not a number is always. Yeah.
They're not the same thing, right? So false is not a number. They're not the same. False is not 0, right? False is not undefined. Right? It's not these things. Undefined is undefined. Right? I don't think I can even do this. Can I? Oh, sick, I can. Sweet. Can I check to see if undefined is undefined? Right? Again, when we say falsy, it does not mean that 0 is the same as false. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that 0 behaves like false when you put it in an if condition. Right? That's all it means. Right? It behaves like false. Cool. So are we good with this? Does that kind of answer your question? Cool. And we're good? Sweet. The reason we're going through these primitives and the reason that I'm making such a big deal about the fact that these values are things that are granted to us by the language, right, is because I want you to see the use, right? I want you to see the purpose of why certain things have been put in here, right? For example, arrays, right? Arrays are really good at one particular thing. Arrays are really good at making lists. If you have a bunch of stuff to keep in order, do I have the tool for you, right? Like, it's arrays. They're built into there, right? You know, instead of me making maybe a bunch of variables such as shopping, so var shopping item 1 equals potato, and maybe shopping item 2. So this is 2, 3, 4. Shopping item 2, maybe shoes. Shopping item 3, leeks. Shopping item 4, beets. Right? Like, it's just annoying for me to have many variables. Right? Absolutely a thing that you could do. Right? But it's annoying. Right? On top of that, figuring out a way to go through each one of these, right? Through each one of these, off the top of my head, can be really difficult, right? I can't figure out how to make like a loop, for example, that'll go through each of these elements. Whereas, if I was to make an array of shopping items, I could go, you know, potato, shoes, leeks, and beets. Right? I can do that, and this is fine. Right? It's given me like a nice convenient way to collect all of this information together. Yes? So Sublime and VS Code, they're pretty cool because like if you're coding in like JavaScript, for example, when you have all of it highlighted, you can do things like single quote. I pressed quote, and it'll just put it on both sides, or I think open round bracket. Yeah, if I do open round bracket, it'll put it on both sides and things like that. Um, yeah, it's all the stuff that you kind of find out by accident as you like mess around with it. But yeah, if you got everything highlighted, there's a couple of those. Square brackets works, double quotes, backticks work. Yeah, yeah. Oh, nope. So, whoop. So I've got these shopping items and I put them in a list, right? And JavaScript gives me a bunch of like nice convenience around this. You know, we've played around with arrays at this point. If I wanted to get one particular item from here, like potato, what would I have to do? I'd have to index and I have to ask it for that element, right? So this is like a more interesting data type than maybe numbers and booleans. It's like a data type that has some form of like interaction with it. I'm asking it, give me the 0th element here, right? On top of that, so if I wanted to get other ones, shopping items, you know, 1, that would get me shoes. Now, on top of that is the fact that arrays have been built to have useful functions inside of them, right? For example, if I have the array numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and first of all, notice that, like, as you've seen, we can make arrays that contain any value that we want of whatever type that we want. Oops, sorry about that. So, you know, here's an array. There's stuff in here like includes, right? Arrays have these, I'm going to call them methods, right? They have these things that are built into them that we can use, right? I can ask, hey, does this array include the number 2, right? Does this array include the number 5? False, right? An array is going to have a for each function, right? Which I'm not going to talk about right now, but I want you to explore, and you will explore it through, I think, tomorrow's activities. Okay? But again, what I'm trying to show is that there's this data type that's been given to us for our convenience, and it's been built up to have useful tools inside of it. Right? It doesn't have to be like an adversary. It doesn't have to be an enemy. It's there to help you, and it's there to make things kind of nicer and easier. Obviously, it takes a little bit of kind of reading, a little bit of learning, and familiarizing yourself before like arrays start feeling like friends. But you get to that point, and eventually, you know, when you see a question or you run into a situation where you say, hey, I have a bunch of stuff, and it needs to be kept in order. What do I use? An array, right? That would just be like your association with the thing. I think that was something I was talking about yesterday, is that over time you build up associations. Was it yesterday? Yeah, cool, right in the morning. Over time you build up associations with particular phrases and particular language, right? And you start translating your problem solving into coding, right? That's where this becomes useful. Now, there's other kinds of questions that we run into, right? There's other kinds of stuff. Instead of I have a bunch of stuff and it needs to be kept in order, I might run into the question of, like, I have a bunch of info, right? I have a bunch of info. The order doesn't matter, right? The order doesn't matter, but I want to ask for it with a particular word. Right? Now, this sentence here feels a little vague because I haven't tied it to anything yet. But what if I was to say something like, I have a bunch of friends, right? So I have a bunch of friends, right? So maybe you're trying to build yourself an application to keep track of all of your friends' phone numbers. I have a bunch of friends. Let's bring out Tyson. Let's bring out Hussein. Let's bring out my friend Jason. I've never put him in this, and I feel bad. And we'll throw Sadie into here. Anybody want to put their friends in here? Does anyone here still have friends? It's like day 3 of boot camp. No? No? I'll put Archie in here. What's up, Archie? We're friends, right? Yeah. Cool. Thanks. So you're, some friends, and I might want to store some info about my friends. Like Tyson really likes sushi, right? Hussein really likes potato salad. Jason, very big into ramen. Sadie's vegetarian, but I'm going to say Sadie really likes steak. Nah, Sadie really likes cauliflower steak. Cauliflower steak. Did I spell cauliflower right? Yeah. And Archie, what kind of food do you like? Bagels. All right. Archie likes bagels. And I want to keep track of this information so that on the fly I can be like, hey, what does Archie like? Or hey, like, what does Jason like? Right? Maybe I'm on my way to Jason's party, right? And I just haven't, like, I'd forgotten to plan. I can pull out the app that I made that tells me Jason really likes ramen. Now, imagine I had 1 billion friends, which I don't. I have 5 friends. But imagine I had many, many friends. Putting this information into an array might be a little awkward. First of all, I might do something like, okay, here's var friends. Here's var friends. How am I going to structure this? Right? Am I going to say something like Jason? Oh, no, let's see. I start off with Tyson Sushi. Do I go Tyson, comma, sushi, comma, Hussein, comma, potato salad, dot, like just on and on and on. And this is something I could do, right? Maybe it wouldn't be the most useful way of doing this, right? But it could absolutely totally work where I do something like, hey, every even index, right? So 0, 2, 4, etc. is a name. And I say every odd index. So, 1, 3, dot, dot, is the food that I'm going to say I minus 1. Okay, so if the odd index is this thing here, which I'm just going to call I, if you go back 1 space, that's the food that person likes, right? Totally something that could work, right? I've encoded all this information into an array, right? And if you wanted to find the food that Hussein likes or the food that Archie likes, right, you might need to somehow like loop through this friends thing, right? But instead of looping through every, like with I++ in your loop, you might loop with I equals I plus 2. Right? And maybe I'll write like an example of what this looks like in the notes and send this out to you. But why would I do this? Right? If there's another option. Right? If there wasn't another option, this is what I would have to do. Right? Or maybe I'd have to come up with another kind of jerry-rigged situation for this. If I wanted to, get even more complex here, and I wanted to put down like, let's see, we got food, and maybe TV show. Like Tyson really likes Game of Thrones, right? Hussein really likes Jessica Jones. Jason really likes, whatever. Now I've got 2 pieces of information that need to be stored with every friend. And that changes the way that I now have to structure this thing. I'd have to go Tyson, sushi, and then next to it, Game of Thrones, comma. Hussein, potato salad, Jessica Jones. Right? And now in here, instead of going I plus 2, I'd have to go I plus 3. Right? Again, it's just making things more and more inconvenient for me. I wish there was a better way. Right? I know I said that today's lecture is going to be about objects, right? But what I really want to do first here, like, is motivate the idea behind objects. Because what I'm noticing is that I'm trying to collect a bunch of information, right? I'm trying to collect the fact that there is a friend Tyson and Hussein and Jason, and that they map to specific information, right? Sadie, for example, maps just to cauliflower steak. So this here is a problem that can be solved by, again, another thing that JavaScript like designers have granted us, which are objects. Right? So an object for us is going to be a key value pair like set. Right? We're going to explore what that means. You're going to see that when you look into objects, you're going to see like many words used. Let's see. Did I not put it in here? No. So often you'll see the words hash, map, a key value pair, object, dictionary, right? Lookup, right? You'll see these words used when people are talking about objects, right? Just naturally bring this stuff over to understanding that we're talking about a JavaScript object. This is a thing that exists in JavaScript, right? In other languages, it might have a different name. In other languages, it might not even exist, right? This is something that the JavaScript designers have in here. And what we're trying to do is map each one of these things together. Tyson, sushi. Hussein, potato salad. Now, I could, again, just like I solved that with an array, I could also solve it. Let me just do that down here. I could also solve it with variables, and I could do something like var Hussein food equals, what did I say, potato salad. Right? Var Jason food, equals ramen. Like I could make myself variables that encode that information as well. Forgot to show you this. An object is going to let us have an actual structure for setting that up. Now, you've seen objects a little bit at this point, right? Am I correct in saying that? Right? You've seen objects a little bit, right? And there's a particular structure that we're going to use for creating objects. So we'll start off by saying, hey, this is some variable, right? Some object. And this here is what I'm going to call an object literal. Right? Object literal means I'm literally writing out the object in line. Right? What you see is the object. This is an object literal. I'm going to hop into the REPL. I'm going to play around with stuff in there a little bit, and then I'm going to take that stuff over into the nodes. So I can make an object, some object equals curly brace. And now whenever I look at some object, it's that thing. And what do we call this? What do we call this object with nothing in it? What's that? Right, so literal is going to mean when I'm writing it out, right? So even when I start adding values into it, if I write them out literally there, that's a literal. But more along the lines of when an object doesn't have anything in it, we call it an empty object, right? So sometimes you'll hear me or you hear a mentor say, hey, create an empty object, right? And what that's going to mean is open curly brace, close curly brace, right? So here's some object, easy, made an object, right? Cool. But objects become useful when we can store information in them. Now, I can, whoops, I shouldn't have done that. Let me open up Node again. That's not what I meant to do. Node, there you go. I can open the curly brace and then start writing stuff on the inside. Right? So the REPL is going to put 3 dots just to show me that the line isn't technically done yet. And I can start doing things like Tyson. I'm just going to say that Tyson maps to sushi. Right? And then underneath I might say Hussein maps to potato salad. And I might say Jason maps to ramen. And then whenever I'm done, so let's just assume these are all the ones I want to do, I can close off with a curly brace, and I'm done. I've collected all of my friend's information into this structure called an object. Notice, like literally I had to write it as this thing colon some value comma. Then another this thing colon some value comma. What we're doing here is we're pairing up keys. So Tyson is going to be the key. Hussein is going to be a key, right? And these are the associated values to those keys. This is why we call it a key value pair. It's because I've got Tyson being the key associated to sushi being the value, right? So when I'd written over here saying that an object is a key value pair set, it's because an object is going to have many key value pairs. Now, let me just write that out here. Of our friends, so I'd said Tyson is, what did I say Tyson was? Sushi. Hussein is potato salad. And then maybe Jason is ramen. We've stored this information, and I can see it now if I was to ask the REPL to print this stuff out. If I went friends, right, all that information has been stored. Right? Storing information is useful on its own, right? I can see the things that I put in there, right? And that might solve an issue for me, right? Because now when I want to figure out what Hussein likes or what Jason likes, I can go friends, right? And I can at a glance be able to say, oh, Hussein likes potato salad, right? And at a glance, this is useful already. Whereas when I was looking at this array that I'd made before, right, I'd need to understand the fact that like what if there was a food that had a name, right? Like Uncle Tetsu, like the cheesecake stuff. Is that what it is? There's like a cheesecake thing. So there's like a cheesecake called Uncle Tetsu's, like Japanese cheesecake. But like, say I throw that my friend Maria likes Uncle Tetsu, right? And I'm like just looking at the array. It might be really difficult for me to realize that Uncle Tetsu isn't a person. Uncle Tetsu is a food, right? Whereas over here, there's very little ambiguity, right? Key value. So storing this stuff is already useful, right? And then I can also individually ask for elements from the object. The thing is, there's going to be two ways for me to do this. Right? I'm going to show you one way right now. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to continue and kind of reiterate on this idea a little bit. If I want to get Tyson's information from an object, this here is the entire object, friends. If I want one part of it or one entry in it, I can do friends.Tyson. Right? So I could use the dot notation to ask for Tyson's food, and I get sushi. Right? So any one of my friends now, I get the food back. If I try a friend who I haven't put into the object yet, such as Sadie, I get undefined. Right? Friends.Archie, undefined. We're not friends yet, Archie, but soon. Soon you'll be in the database. Right? Undefined. It didn't throw an error, right? That's interesting. It didn't freak out at me. It just said, hey, it's not there. Cool. Does this idea make sense to people so far? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So to find the person who likes sushi in here, that's going to be a little more difficult. Because the thing is, the mapping on the inside here, if I'm looking at this object, it goes Tyson, sushi, Hussein, potato salad, Jason, ramen. Okay. But say I had another friend in here, like we'll go Maria likes ramen as well. It becomes a little bit more nuanced, right? The fact that I can ask for JSON and I'll get back one thing, right? Whereas if I was to ask for ramen, right, all of a sudden now I'm getting multiple things back, and that becomes a bit more complicated. That's a really good question though, and I think maybe I think we will dive into that in the second half. I'll make a note of it. How to find keys by value. Cool. Any other questions? Sweet. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take like a 10-minute break, and at let's do 10:02. 10:02 we'll continue. Sweet. Thanks everyone. Hey everyone. Do we have everyone back? Are we missing anyone? Awesome. Huh? Missing one? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, 14 of us. Yeah, yeah. Cool, cool. Counted. Sweet. So when we left off, right, we talked about storing this data somewhere, right? And even asking for some of it kind of back. There was this really interesting question about how to find a particular key by the value, right? And the reason that I say it's like maybe like a little bit more complicated than you know we might want it to be is because objects are designed, right? Objects are designed to be for storing a mapping from one thing to another, right? Not necessarily back, right? From a key to a value, and that's the purpose that they serve, right? If we wanted to do more on that, right, that goes beyond what the basic functionality of an object is for, right? So we might need some other type, right? Like another language might introduce a different type for us to use, or we might have to write some code to make it work, right? Now, here, this here is an object literal, like I said before, right? I'm literally writing out the object. Now, once an object exists, and I just took out Maria there so that I can just have these three, it doesn't mean that I can't do anything else with it, right? If you noticed, you know, like I said, friends.archie, like this didn't break, right? It didn't break. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that it's still useful for me to check or play around with things that don't exist so that maybe I can add something in there. Right? Here I'm asking, hey, can you use the Archie key in the friends object and give me what it maps to? Right? Now, if I had a variable, right, a variable such as, you know, dogs, if the variable doesn't exist yet, I'm going to have to go ahead and make it. And it's possible for me to not set it to anything. I can say var dogs and then not set it to anything. Now dogs is undefined. And this is not unlike me saying friends.archie is undefined. Right? It's not unlike that. If I wanted to store a value into dogs, right? At any point I can go dogs equals, let me just make this an array, spot and Jim. Here you go. I've got two dogs in here, bless you. Dogs and Jim. And the thing was the assignment happened with this equal sign. The same thing is going to happen with objects. If I want to, after I have created the object, assign something to it, so friends already exists, but I want to assign something to friends.archie, I can go friends.archie equals and then assign something there. So earlier we said like Archie likes bagels, so I can go friends.archie equals bagels. And what this is going to do is it's going to go into that object that had been created before, and it's going to register a new key. And now I've got Tyson is sushi, Hussein, Jason, and I've got Archie for bagels. Right? That's going to be the flow for us for assigning new keys and values to an object, right? Very similar to us assigning values to a variable, right? Friends.archie equals bagels. Absolutely. So the commas here, like this is the way that the object kind of gets represented, right? And yeah, it'll automatically, like in its representation, have commas in there, right? When you're creating an object, that's when you like need to put commas in, right? Because here we're telling JavaScript this is what our object is, but as I'm assigning keys, like that's gonna happen automatically. And now what's cool about this is that like I can assign, and just like I can with dogs, reassign this to the number 12, and now dogs is no longer that array that I'd made, I can reassign keys to different values. So it used to be that friends Archie was bagels. I'm going to say Archie likes, I don't know. Archie, what other kind of food do you like? Chips, right? And now when I look at friends, I have Tyson, Sushi, Hussein, Jason, and then Archie's chips. Notice that there's no longer a trace of bagels, right? This goes back to the conversation that we had yesterday, right? Is bagels has just disappeared, right? Bagels isn't even a thing anymore, right? Archie likes chips, right? So this is useful because like I can update information in an object, right? To add on to like that question that we might have asked ourselves earlier, which is, I have a bunch of info, the order doesn't matter, but I want to ask for it with a particular word. I might also say, I want to be able to update, or edit this info. Okay? And that's something that an object is evidently allowing us to do, right? It lets us store something somewhere and go and update it. It lets us retrieve particular things. I can ask for particular info. Right? You see the convenience behind something like this. Right? Now these are really the main things that you kind of need to know, is that I can store things in an object, and I can retrieve things in an object. Right? Getting a little bit more into the details here, I'm just going to put this question like way down because we're going to maybe talk about that at the end. Getting a bit more into the details, the key of an object is always going to be a string. Right? I know I haven't written it as a string yet, right? But I'm going to show you the other notation that makes it clear that this is a string. So the key of an object is going to be a string, and the value can be anything. Right? Absolutely anything. For example, it could be a string. We've done that. Value is string. Another example is it could be a number. Right? Conceivably, I could go Jason 12. Right? I could do that, and we'll play around with that. It could be a number. It could be a Boolean. It could be an array. It could be an array. It could even be another object. I could have a key that points to an object. Right? So I've got some like nesting situation in here. Right? And we're going to explore that a little bit more. And then I'm also going to put this down. The value could be a function. Right? This is going to feel a little funky. It's going to feel a little weird, but we're going to explore that. So I've said that the key can be only a string. It can't be anything but that. And what I mean by that is this. I've shown you that to access values inside of an object, let me go friends dot Tyson. That gets me sushi, and I can assign a new key value pair. So I could go friends dot Archie equals bagels, and then update. Could go friends dot Archie. Archie equals, and then we said chips. Right. So I've used this dot notation so far. Right? And what's gone on with the dot notation is that I'm asking the object to then get me this, like, using that key, get me the associated value. Right? One of the words that you'll hear me say often is property. Access that property of an object. Right? So here I'm accessing the Archie property. It's easier than saying, oh, can you access the value that's associated with the key Archie? Right? When I say property, I mean get me the value from the key. So accessing the Archie property here in friends. Now, I can also write this ways to interact with objects. I can also write this with the square bracket notation. Right? And the square bracket notation is where people tend to get a little confused, right? Where the difference is between the square bracket and the dot. So I said I can do friends.archie because the property is called Archie. I can say friends square bracket, and then in here I can write a string. I can give this a string, Archie. These two things do the same thing. The exact same thing. It's just that some programmers find that this is just a lot to write. They don't like having to write these two little bits. So they'll want to shorten it to a dot. It also looks more similar to the syntax that's used in some other languages. So if you know the name, if you know the name of the property that you're trying to access, you can use a dot, right? And this is going to be shorthand for this. But notice again, this is a string, right? There's not going to be a friends true as a Boolean. There isn't going to be a friends, pass an object in here. There isn't going to be a friends, like other stuff. It's going to be friends and then a string. There's not going to be friends number, because when we do this, right, what is this syntax used for? For indexing an array, right? We're not going to do numbers. This would be fine. That's legal. That's okay. So we're going to do this. Now, just to show you that this works, if I go in here and I go friends square bracket Archie, right, I get chips back. And if I was to do something that didn't exist again, right, Maria, this works the same as if I had done that. Right? So exact same thing. But what's important is that here I have to write the name of the property. Here, I can pass it a value. I can pass it a string. Meaning that if I had a variable called name that had been set to Archie, I can ask for friends square bracket name. Right? Notice that if I had done friends.name, and we're going to run this code in a second, this is going to go look for the property name, which there isn't one. Whereas this over here, it's going to resolve this and understand that when I say name here within the square brackets, I'm talking about Archie. Right? So that's the main kind of big distinction here. Is whereas with the dot, I have to write the actual property. Here I'm able to pass it something. And we're going to see that I can pass it stuff dynamically. Right? So friends dot name. Now, friends square bracket name. I'm going to say this doesn't work. Undefined. Whoop. Right, and just to test this one out here, if I was to go to this, I've got a variable called name, which is Archie. And if I go friends chips, right? Can you see why this might be useful? Right? Because I might not know the name of the person that I'm actually looking for. That might be something that like a user inputs. Right? That might be something that like a user writes. Remember how yesterday we were doing command line arguments? I might have a program that says something like node, and maybe we'll do this in a minute, get friend, and then pass in the name. And it could be Archie or it could be Jason. Right? I want to be able to write my program so that in the actual code of the program, it doesn't necessarily depend on the name Archie. It could be something like process.argv 2. Right, so what we saw yesterday was process.argv gets us the command line arguments. And in fact, if I was to do that, let's just do that in a print, or what did I call it, get friend. get friend, and then I'm just gonna put the friends. I'm just gonna code Archie into here with bagels. And this is gonna be console.log friend name. And I'll say food for that person is this thing. When I try to run this program, node getFriend.js on JSON, I get food for that person is ramen. When I go, Tyson, I get food for that person is sushi, right? And I've made this incredibly powerful program, right? Like I'm able to dynamically select what I want from my little, I could even call it a database, right? A little place where I've stored all this interesting data. And I can do this stuff dynamically. I don't have to have, Archie or Jason or Tyson written in here, right? It can be dependent on what the user puts in. Cool. So this I really, really want you to become comfortable with. The difference or the distinction between the dot notation, right, and the square brackets. The dot notation, again, is just shorthand for a string, right? There is no way for me to do something with the dot and pass this name into here. There's no way. Instead, I'm going to have to do the square bracket notation. Does that make sense to everyone? Right. Are there questions around this? The other thing that I really want to drive home is the distinction between the key and the value. Right? The key is one thing. Right? It's one string. The value is like the output that I've asked for. When I write this, friend's name, notice that in the console log here, I don't get Tyson. I only get sushi. If I also wanted to print out Tyson, I'd have to say the food for, food for Tyson, not Tyson, sorry, name is friend name. Like I'd have to put that in there. Right? But there's a distinction between the thing that I'm using as a key and the value that I get back. Yeah. So continuing on from this, I've currently made objects that point to strings, right? Equally worthwhile to play around with. Some of my favorite. We'll just do. Let's go inventory. var inventory, right? Again, some place where like the order of the things doesn't matter, but I'm trying to maybe map one key to a certain value, such as how many ketchup chips I have, right? Ketchup chips might be 5. How many shirts do I have? Maybe I have 10. Right? And the reason I say that the order doesn't matter is because I could change these things around. Where does it go? I could change these things around, and I could say shirts is 10 and ketchup chips is 5, right? And it wouldn't make a difference. It wouldn't make a difference because I'm never asking for things in order. I'm not asking for an index. I'm asking for things by key. Now, I'm going to hop away from this set of things real quick just to show one thing that kind of relates to what you'd asked in a kind of roundabout way. Just like how I'd shown that arrays have interesting things inside of them, like I could make an array var just nums 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can say something like nums.includes 4. That's a thing that's been built into it by like the people who made JavaScript. There's interesting things that you can do with objects. Now, it's not going to necessarily be the way I've written it right now. Instead, there's a thing called object, which is the global object. It's this global kind of idea of an object that lives in JavaScript. And what that's going to let me do is, say I have that friends array from before. Var friends equals, say I have that friends array from before, so friends object from before, Tyson, Hussein, Jason, Archie. If I wanted to see a list of all of my friends, just the keys, I can write object.keys friends. And this is just a useful function that lives inside of JavaScript that gives me back an array of every one of the keys. Right? Object keys. There are times when you might ask yourself, hey, you know what? I don't really care about what these people like right now. I just want all of these people in an array so that maybe I can do something useful with them. Like maybe I want to send an email or a text message to every one of my friends. Okay? This might be one way to do it. Object keys gives me an array. Now, I said that it kind of relates to the question that you'd asked, right? Because now that I have the keys, I could maybe make a loop and loop over all of the keys and use those keys to then access the values, right? We're going to see that. That's going to be a little weird, right? I don't expect you to be fully comfortable with it. But say I had something like, here is that friends thing again, right? So, whoa, woof. Friends is, this thing. And say I wanted to print out all of the food that these people like, I could get maybe all my friend names by asking for the keys. Right, so this gets me an array. And there's something interesting that I can do with arrays. I can write a for loop. Right? I could write for var I equals 0 while I is less than, and what would I write here? Friend names dot length, right? Because I'm trying to loop over this friend names array. And then I plus plus. And then in here, I is going to be, 0 or 1 or 2. But I can, get the particular name from the array by going var name equals friend names, index of I. And now this is going to be either, Tyson, for example. And I know that I can access the food that this person likes by using the square bracket, since this is some dynamic information. So if I wanted to access the food of that person, you can go var food equals friends given that name. And then I can go ahead and console log maybe name. Let's do name likes food. Right, so now as I loop over all of the friends, so let me do that in here. I've got friend names being that array. If I was to run this loop, what I would see when I press enter in a second is all of the names matched with all of the food. Tyson likes sushi, Hussein likes potato salad, Jason likes ramen. Right? Again, this is why those square brackets, right? This is why those square brackets are useful, right? Because I can dynamically access things in an object, right? So another thing that you might like kind of add to this situation here where I want to be able to update, edit this info, I also want to be able to access values with like dynamic keys, right? Meaning user input or through a loop, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Right, so again, I know I keep coming back to this point, but I want to stress that this stuff gets put into a language because it's supposed to make your life more convenient, right? And when you understand the motivation between why a particular thing exists and what problem it's aiming to solve, right? As opposed to how do I use this tool, right? It's like, why would I use this tool? I think that that's like a good approach to learning parts of a programming language, right? And beyond just the object talk, right, like that we're talking about today, and we're going to do a little bit more, beyond just that, I want you to take that mindset into the things that you're learning, for example, tomorrow, right? Into the things that you're learning further on in the boot camp, especially in these first 2 weeks, right? You're going to talk about callbacks, for example, tomorrow, right? Has anybody here heard of callbacks before? Right? You've heard of them a little bit. You're going to dive into them deeply tomorrow. Callbacks tend to be like a little bit of a stumbling point. And I think part of the reason is that people get really fixed on how to use it. Right? How do I use a callback? Right? Or how do I use a function? But until you understand why you would want to use a callback or why you would want to use like an object or a function or whatever, right? You won't be able to really use it because you won't be in the right mindset for it. So here now, right, I've made these objects, I've collected info in them, I've gone through them dynamically. I'd said that you can also point this stuff to booleans in the same way that you can point to numbers and strings. Arrays are going to be pretty interesting. Arrays are going to be pretty neat because I could make let's continue on with the friends, I guess, a little bit. If I had my friends like I did before, I think way up here I'd written something along the lines of Tyson likes sushi and Game of Thrones, right? Or Hussein likes potato salad and Jessica Jones. Let me rewrite this to say something more like, at the moment, Tyson likes sushi, pizza, and craft beer. So Tyson likes multiple foods. And we've seen that when you have a bunch of things, right, a bunch of things that maybe need to be kept in order or maybe aren't associated with a particular key, right? I'm just trying to collect things together. An array is a good way of doing that. So instead of me pointing Tyson to a string, I could decide to point Tyson to sushi, pizza, and beer. And now since I'm doing that with Tyson, like I'm pointing Tyson to an array, it's probably good practice to make sure that everybody is an array, just so that everyone has like kind of a similar structure to them. Because I might want to in the future add things to Archie or add things to Jason. Okay, I might in the future want to play around with this. In fact, I want to do that right now. So if, whoops, oh man, node, okay. If this is my friend's object, right, the one that I just wrote out right now, when I ask for Tyson, I get back sushi, pizza, beer. When I ask for Jason, I get ramen. This thing here is an array. What kind of things can I do with arrays? Just in general. I can access stuff by an index. So maybe if I go friends Tyson 1, I just get back pizza. Right? So don't get lost in the fact that, oh, it's an array inside of an object, right? It's still just an array, right? So you can do all the things that you can usually do with arrays. Another thing that I can do with arrays is push stuff to them, right? So every array, like, we'll just do nums. Nums 1, 2, 3. Every array is going to have a push function built into it. And I can say push the number 4. And what this does is, if I look at the original array, that array has now been changed. It's been changed to have the number 4 in it. So if I look at my friends and I want to add something to Jason, I want to modify what's there for Jason, I can go friends.json, and since Jason is an array, I can go friends.json.push. And I could add something else in here. Maybe Jason's into ramen and also into, there's food, salad, right? It's gonna go potato salad, and I guess I already did that. We're gonna say burgers. And now what I see when I go to friends Jason is ramen and burgers, right? And I have this way now of reaching into an object, following to find the property that I want and modifying it, right? We did that before with strings, where I went in and I reassigned it. Now I'm going in and I'm adding something to it if it's an array, right? There's a pop method that arrays have that removes things from arrays. So say I wanted to get rid of burgers for Jason. Now I go friends.json, and Jason's back to just ramen. Yeah, so pop is going to remove the very, very last element of an array. It's just going to take it out. So in here, I'm just going to throw this. That we can go friends, Jason, push, burgers. Now, I can go deeper. I can go even deeper. Something that I might do is, if we look at what I've done up here, it said sushi, pizza, craft beer, and I used to have Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. These are two different pieces of information that are both associated with Tyson, right? This thing here is like a show, right? And this thing here is like foods. Food. Is food plural? Food. Right? We've got a show and we've got food. And over here I also have, food and show. So what would the logical kind of organization or structure for me to use to collect this information be? If I have a bunch of labels and a bunch of values associated with it. Key value pairs, right? So here, like now I've found another place where I have somewhere where I can use key value pairs, right? I might go into let me just, I'm going to take this here and expand on this a bit more. I might go into this and say, hey, instead of Tyson pointing to this array directly, I can make Tyson point to an object. And inside of that object, what I might say is, here's the food for Tyson, and here's the show for Tyson. Right? And I've been able to organize my information a little bit more. I might do that in other places. So here's the food for Hussein, and the show for Hussein, I think I'd said, was Jessica Jones. Right? And then we might do Jason here, which was food, ramen. I'm just gonna Archie, and then show. Maybe they don't like a show, and I'd just leave it blank or null, or I could even just not put it in there. right? I'm going to set it to null, so it's just blank. And then same with Archie. Maybe Archie just doesn't. Archie, do you watch TV? So much? What show are you on right now? What's that? Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I've been watching it too, yeah. Oh, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Is it 9-9? No, we're just gonna go with the number 9. No, if there's some like Brooklyn Nine-Nine fans in the crowd who like yell at me afterwards, like, what? Can't believe Nemo's a fraud. He doesn't actually watch the show. So no, I watch it. I just fall asleep. And here I have nested objects. Right, I've got one object, and every one of these keys is pointing to other objects. Okay? This is awesome because I can go deeper and edit these values as well. If this was my friend's thing, if these were my friends, I could go to friends, we'll go friends Hussein show. Friends.Hussein is going to be an object, and friends.Hussein.show, right, because I can access deeper now, is going to be a string. If I wanted to reassign parts of this thing, friends.Hussein.show, maybe I'll set this to Babar, right? Maybe he's really into Babar. And now what I see when I go to friends is going to say that Tyson likes sushi, pizza, beer, and the show Game of Thrones. Hussein likes potato salad, and the show is Babar, right? And I've been able to go through and update that stuff a little bit. Yes? Exactly, right? I'd only be able to push to it if that show value was an array. Right, so we are dependent on the type of value that I associate with each key. Right. So this here, supremely useful, because now what I might have done before as many different variables, or this monster of a, where's this thing? This thing over here where I'd squished everything into an array, right? I can collect that stuff into something that's got this nice hierarchy, and it's got this nice set of ways for me to access things and to change things kind of on the fly, even dynamically. Now, there's a couple kind of smaller picky bits that I want to point out. So in the notes, or rather in the goals that we kind of set for ourselves, there's objects, which I feel like, are we comfortable with the idea of an object now? Obviously, you're going to need to work with it. You're going to need to play with it. You need to break these and see what they can do. Primitive data types, right? That's something we've talked a little bit about. And now I want to talk a bit more about objects in the context of like functions, and then talk about this. But there was a small, there's a thing I wanted to do here. So there is an idea in JavaScript, and it's pass by value versus pass by reference. So when I'm talking about like primitives, when I'm talking about things like a number, it becomes really easy for JavaScript to just make new copies of that number wherever it's needed. So when I do like, let's see, you know what, let's see, maybe I'm lying. We'll try this out. If I go var num equals 12, and I go var other num equals num, I'm just blanking on something real quick, so we'll just see. Var other num equals num. Other num is 12, and num is 12. And if I go other num equals 5, I just want to see 2. There we go. So does this idea kind of surprise anyone? Do you see what I did? I assigned a new variable, right, other num, to have that value of num, which was 12. I checked that other num and num were both pointing to the number 12, right? They both were 12. And then when I reassigned other num to the number 5, what happened was that the original num here, it didn't change. The original num was fine. Numbers are like simple values. So JavaScript can just make new numbers kind of on the fly. And it's easier for JavaScript to give each variable its own number as opposed to make different variables like share the same number. Now, this idea here, it has to do with new values being created. When I am calling a function, this is getFriend. No, we're going to do that down here. When I am calling a function, such as I have like function say hello to a name, and this goes console, say hello to friend, and maybe I have the variable friend, which is Jane, and in here I go name equals Sally, and I go console.log like friend. This is going to be similar, or like, oh no, sorry, not name equals Sally. Name to say equals name. So I'm trying to get like really kind of, it's supposed to be kind of weird. Okay, so this code here is bizarre, like you wouldn't write code like this. But what I've written is a function that says say hello, receives a name, saves that name in a variable, and I forgot to write the word var in here. Saves that name to a variable, then reassigns that other variable, right? And then console logs that variable that it had made. You know, it ends up console logging Sally, but the important thing is that like the friend that was out here is still pointing to Jane. Right? I don't want you to feel like super necessarily comfortable with this idea just yet. Because a copy of the string was passed in. Right? It wasn't the actual string, it was like a new copy of it and was passed in. Now, instead, if I was to, you know, maybe do this stuff with objects, where I say like, what if a function modified an object, right, that was passed to it? So if I did something like function set, we'll say set movie or show to Game of Thrones, and this is just like a function that, given a particular set or a particular maybe person, given a particular person, this function goes into that person and sets their show to Game of Thrones. And now say that I have var, and we're going to do Bradlina. Have I used the name Bradlina with y'all before? Yeah? Snap. That's a one-time joke, I guess. So Bradlina, you know, who is, you know, maybe name Bradlina, maybe food is tacos, and then show, you know, maybe Bradlina really liked, we're going to go with Westworld. If I was to call set show to GOT, right, Game of Thrones on Bradlina, and then console.log Bradlina, this will have changed what was the show for that person. Right? So let me just paste these things in here. I have function set show to Game of Thrones. I have Bradlina in here. If I was to call set show to Game of Thrones on Bradlina, now when I check on Bradlina, the show is Game of Thrones. Right? So I'm able to make functions as well that modify things inside of objects. Now, once I've done something like that, right, it kind of, it's easy to start thinking about, like, what if I set the person equal to something else, like equal to, for example, an empty object. So function destroy person, right? Given a person, you know, maybe this would take the person and make them nothing. And say I did, you know, destroy person on Bradlina, and then console.logged what Bradlina is now. What I'm going to find is that when I try to destroy person on Bradlina, is that Bradlina is still totally fine. Right? Which is a little surprising. I didn't expect that to happen. Right? When I try to destroy Bradlina by setting Bradlina to an empty object, right? There's something built into JavaScript that's going to stop that from happening. Right? Something built into JavaScript that's not going to let me completely destroy an object. Right? It won't let me reassign the object. What it's going to let me do is it's going to let me change the stuff inside of it. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is an idea called this. I'm going to keep this very, very minimal, right? There's going to be more questions that you have, and I really want you to explore it on your own, and then maybe ask me or a mentor during like the mentor time. Here, what I can do is at any point use the word this, and this is a variable. This is a value that exists in JavaScript. And I'm going to say that this, so this is going to be a reference to the context. The context being, what context is the code running in right now? You know, who is running this particular section of code? So if I am at the beginning of my program, or Control D, if I am in the beginning of Node, right, in the beginning of the REPL, and I go this, what I end up seeing is the global space, right? The global space of all of the things that Node kind of comes with, and you could scroll through this and learn all about stuff that is built into Node. V8, zlib, right? ICU, stuff that I didn't make. This is going to be a reference to who is currently running this stuff. What do these things kind of look like, by the way? What's that? This is like one big object, right? It's like an object with like, for example, many little properties. Let me just scroll to a place where many little properties like arrays. Whoops. Arrays being a key and the value being this thing. Right? And some of these are, you know, maybe keys that point to, like keys that point to objects themselves. Right? This stuff is just going to pop up. But the context of this, or like the place where this becomes interesting, is say that I have two different objects, like red circle and blue square. Right? These are two objects that are pretty similar in the content of like what they have in them. Color and shape. Both of them have color and shape. and then I make myself a function. I make myself a function. Let me rewrite this way. Like function. I make a function like describe. And I say describe is going to say console log. And then are y'all comfortable with this notation here, or is that weird to y'all? I would personally actually rather not use it. So let me just move this somewhere else and edit it. So say I have this thing saying I'm a, and then instead of this saying $signs or whatever, these are just a bunch of strings that are concatenated. So this should be a plus, and that's cool. So this says I'm a this dot color space this dot shape. In this case here, we don't yet know what this means, but I can take a function and I can assign it as a value inside of an object. Right? Any object. If I could do this anywhere. If I have the object var dog, and dog has name spot, right? It can also have a property called bark, which could be a function, right? It could be a function, which I'm just going to write in line at the moment. Function bark that console.logs woof. Okay, and I know that this is a bit of a departure from what we've done, but just bear with me for a sec. I've made a dog that has a name and it has a bark function. What this allows me to do is, access dog.name and also access dog.bark. Woof. Right? So that's what's happening here, is a similar kind of idea where I'm taking describe, that describe function that we made, and I'm assigning it to red circle and I'm assigning it to blue square. And then what happens is when I call red circle.describe, it runs this code. I'm a this color, this shape. And the thing is that at that point, this is going to mean this. Right? This is something that you're going to have to just kind of accept right now, right? And you're going to explore more and more. But as I now run these things, let me just run this whole thing all the way to attaching it. If I say red circle.describe, I get I'm a red circle. And if I go blue square.describe, I get I'm a blue square. Right? Where now I've made a function that customizes itself, or it customizes the output to the context that it's running in. Right? I know this is like a big idea, right? And it's like a kind of a bigger kind of addition. Maybe it feels cruel for me to put this at the end of the lecture, but it's something that I want you to play with. Right? Where this is going to mean who is currently running that function. Right? Who is currently running that function? At the moment, if I write this, the global scope is saying this. Here, if I hop into the describe code, which says this, the blue square is calling describe, so the blue square is going to be this. Right? And in fact, let me just add one more function in here. Say this. That console logs this is, and then this, so we can see what that is. Say this. So say that I have that function in here. Right? So say this is in there, and also This should be red circle. And also I attach say this to both the red circle and the blue square. When I ask red circle to say what this is, whoops. I accidentally saved it under describe. That was a mistake. This should be say this and say this. Right? When I go red circle dot say this, I get this is, and notice that this is that object. Right? It even includes that describe and say this that I put in there. And when I say blue square dot say this, that is the blue square. Cool. So closing off the idea here, objects, useful way for grouping together information, useful way to give us methods for accessing stuff inside, for retrieving stuff and updating. Right? This idea of this is something that I want you to play with. Right? But overall, this is pretty much it. Just keep in mind the dot notation and the square bracket notation and exactly what they're for. Right? The notes for this I already have on GitHub. It's going to take me a minute to like compile this stuff together and send it off to you. Right? I have to run for a meeting. But are there questions? Yes.
When you put the function inside the object,
Mm-hmm.
does the key have to be named the same thing as the function?
No, so the function itself, the question was when I put a function inside of an object, like I did with the dog up here. Oh man, this is gonna be like way far up. Oh my god, where did I put it? Yeah, so when I did like the dog, for example, I went bark. You don't have to give functions names. You can, but you don't have to. For right now, I'm going to say sure, yeah, but it actually doesn't make a difference. You can name things whatever you want.
So then when you call it, when you say blue square dot say this is referring to the key as opposed to the function.
Yeah, when you say blue square dot say this, that refers to the key, as opposed to what you might have called the function. Those two things can be different, but the dot is going to then ask us to say the name of the key.
So if you run blue square dot describe, it's going to run the say this function because this is
Yeah, if I say blue square dot describe, because before I'd accidentally connected the say this function to describe. I just pasted in wrong code. Now that runs the say this function. Yeah. So the keys and the function name, they don't have to match. When you want to call the stuff, you have to call it by the key. Sweet. Did y'all feel like this was informative? Right? Cool. Send me any questions that you might have through Slack, right? Or come grab me. I'm going to be in pretty soon. And have a great rest of the day. It's Wednesday. Oh my god, you made it day 3. Woo! So cool. No breakout today. Yeah. All right. Great. Thanks, everyone.